Okay. Christine, we're recording the meeting. Do you want to formally open it and we'll get started?
All right, so today is Wednesday, May 13th. It is approximately 10:15, and we are conducting the Second Bridge Committee meeting. Most of this meeting, I'm going to turn it over to Craig and Tom. They have a lot of information to share with us. So with that said, Craig, thank you.
Thank you, Christine. With that said, Tom.
Right. I'm gonna share my screen, and so I hope everybody can see that. But again, good morning. Again, I'm Tom Errico. I am the project manager for the study. I work for TY Lin. We're based in Falmouth, and so we met. I think we met back in, it was August. So it's been a while since we've been together. We haven't been sitting idle. There's been a lot of work going on with both, with all our partners. We have consultants and certainly staff at Maine DOT. And so what I want to kind of touch on is sort of our agenda, introductions. There are some meeting minutes that were in the packet. And I think, Christine, we're not going to vote on anything. Is that correct? So again, I think review those minutes, and then at a future meeting, those will be formally approved. And so the way it's going to shake out is I'm going to kind of go through. There's a big document that was in the packet that you received. I'm kind of going to walk through and kind of hit the highlights of the existing conditions analysis. Some of that information was presented previously to you, but I think we've done a lot more since last summer. And so I'm going to kind of walk through that. I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about the alternatives, the alternatives that we're considering as part of our evaluation. One of the things that we've done is we've estimated volumes as part of our process and study. What would traffic be like 20 to 30 years in the future? And then what would happen if you build certain bridge configurations at certain locations in the area? How does it influence traffic patterns? And so it's really informative. We'll talk a little bit about truck volumes. We know truck traffic is important in understanding and assessing as part of our work. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll get into sort of the highway bridge concept design. Give you sort of that 30,000 foot view of what we've been doing from that perspective. Talk a little bit about system management. Are there things you could do within the existing roadway infrastructure to make things work better? Talk about the next public meeting. We had a public meeting last September. We're now ready for another one to start feeding some more information like what we're going to show you today to the public. Hit on schedule, and then anything else anybody wants to talk about. So that's the agenda. That's how we're going to kind of walk through it.
Can I know I'm interrupting, Tom, but how long is our meeting gonna take? Can we come to a little shared agreement on that? What are you thinking, Tom?
I'm thinking. I mean, certainly it's based upon input and feedback and discussion. But I would think we would be running about an hour, would be my guess. From this point forward, I would think about an hour.
Yeah. And does that sound okay to everybody before I let Tom go here? If we plan to adjourn this meeting about 11:15? I don't see any objections. So that's what we'll plan on. And Tom, would you like people to hold questions or interrupt or whatever? I'm going to turn back to you, but whatever. Yeah, turning back to you, Tom.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. I would just assume have questions as I proceed along. I mean, that's traditionally how I like to do it if we were doing a face-to-face meeting. And so I think if we're going through something, raise your hand and I'll do my best to respond. I'll say that if I can't respond to a question today, we'll provide some sort of written response. There may be questions that I don't have an answer to. But we certainly will get you some response formally if I can't answer it today. All right, so the meeting minutes are here. I'm not going to go through those. Again, I think that'll be for a future meeting. So the first item I want to go through is the existing condition report, and I assume everybody sees this. And so there's a lot here. I just want to sort of hit the high points, go through this. It's still considered draft. There's still some revisions we're doing it, particularly as it relates to the environmental section. There's just some minor tweaks before it actually gets the final stamp put on it. But I'll give it a 98% complete kind of, where we're at on it. And so really provides a lot of information. Again, remember, we've talked about this, the study purpose. And again, I'm not going to walk through it, but that study purpose, study need is our guiding sort of principle about what we're going to refer to as we continue to move along and look at these alternatives in specific detail in terms of measuring feasibility. So just keep that in mind. It's in that document. Something we're going to go back to quite a bit. Back last June, the Department of Transportation collected a lot of traffic information. We have really good information. And so these bubble diagrams represent, I'm not going to go through them, I won't torture you, but basically these represent, how many vehicles are turning at certain intersections. This is really what we rely on in understanding the performance and how well intersections either work or don't work from a congestion perspective. So these are important. Really solid information. So we sort of depict that. We have some understanding about what's going on from a time of day perspective. So this bar chart represents volumes going across the Smith bridges. And in the morning, you see this orange. Orange is southbound. It's really high going southbound. People heading to the school potentially. Heading south towards, I-95 and Waterville, Augusta. And then you're seeing the reverse happening, in the afternoon where northbound is a little bit heavier than southbound. And so fundamentally in terms of total volume, that afternoon tends to be the higher combined worst case scenario from a peak hour perspective. Day of week, I think we've talked about this. It's really the highest volumes tend to be during the week. And Friday tends to be the highest. Weekends have less traffic than during the week. And then the Department of Transportation had a permanent count station on the bridge, the Smith Bridge, back in 2014. That was the last year that they had data for every day of the entire year. And so we're able to sort of document how it changes seasonally. And again, this sort of just summarizes that summertime tends to be a little bit higher than those shoulder winter months. These are average annual daily traffic volumes, which basically represent, you set up a tube, you count every single day of the year, you sum it up, divide by 365, that's the number. That's what theoretically the average annual average daily number is. And I'll just note that the bridge carries just under 24,000 cars on average a day. So a lot of traffic. As I think everybody knows that there's a lot of traffic on the road or on that bridge. This graphic just summarizes some existing truck traffic, which was based upon turning movement counts. There's about 1,000 combined, both box trucks and tractor trailer over a 12-hour period crossing the bridge, the Smith bridges. So one of the things that we wanted to do as part of sort of like our baseline understanding of traffic conditions is really understanding sort of origin destination patterns, particularly related to trucks and certainly other vehicles too. But we did collect some or analyze some data that helped us sort of understand that. And so this data represents basically patterns crossing the Smith bridges and sort of origin destination. So from the standpoint of you know, where are they going to the north and to the east? There's roughly 47 headed up towards 201 to the north, 35% heading up North Avenue, 18% heading east on 2, and then on the south side, 35% of, again, these are heavy vehicle trucks headed to the west on 2, 50% headed east-southeast on 201, and 15% headed on Main Street. So that's generally the pattern of trucks. We also sort of drill down to understanding specifically, and again, this is really informative to understanding, like if you built a bridge, where would the trucks go? So what we found was that if you're arriving from the east on 2, that about half would cross the bridge and half would go up 201 north. And then in terms of vehicles exiting on 2 going east, about 71% roughly had origins on the bridge to the east, and then 25% was coming down 201 and going east. And so we had various sort of origin, destination, entry, exit points, and these graphics sort of present you know, what's happening from a truck distribution perspective. And so I'm not going to kind of go through these, but I think they're relatively straightforward. I'm not going to talk about that. So the other thing that we wanted to gain an understanding on was safety. And so we collected crash data, safety data from Maine DOT, and there are currently 3 locations. These orange stars represent something called a high crash location, and they tend to have at least 8 crashes over a 3-year period, and a certain rate that is over 1 in terms of how often or how you compare locations statewide. And so those 3 popped up as being high crash locations. The Island Ave, Main Street, West Front Street, Waterville Road intersection, the Commercial Elm Madison Ave intersection, and then the Water Commercial Court Street intersection. So those 3 popped up. There were a couple others that had some crashes that weren't technically high crash locations, but they had, you know, a certain number that we thought were appropriate to add. We have collision diagrams that tell us what's happening at those high crash locations. So this is that Commercial Court Water Street intersection, and you know, vehicles going around the corner, the triangle, and they're getting hit by vehicles going west. So you can kind of see how things shake out at the various locations in terms of pattern. That helps us understand what's going on and maybe how to mitigate some of those safety problems. And then the next thing is related to traffic mobility and intersection capacity. And basically we have a model, we plug in a lot of information, traffic controls, signal timing, the number of vehicles, the type of vehicles, and other things, and we come up with something called the level of service. And basically, it's from a qualitative perspective, it's rated on like a school grade card from A to F, A being a good intersection, F being a poor intersection, and it's delay driven. How long do you wait at an intersection in terms of seconds per vehicle? So the first intersection that's in this table is the one that really doesn't work well. I think everybody knows about it, Main Street, Island Ave. You know, the model's confirming what we see in the field. There are long queues, there are long delays. Many of the other intersections, quite frankly, work reasonably well. Now, some of these conclusions assume there's some optimization of the traffic signal timing, if it is signal controlled. The one other intersection that has some issues from a delay level service perspective is Madison, Elm, and Commercial Street. So this is sort of setting the baseline, and we'll use this model to do some estimating of level service and delay in the future and with various alternatives. We We looked at bicycle pedestrian facilities and information to gain an understanding of those types of mode and infrastructure and what's accommodated in terms of sidewalks, crosswalks. And so we provide some, general qualitative documentation of that. We talk about some shoulders and really related to more like bicycle accommodations. Are there shoulders so that a bicyclist is appropriately, has some space. So we provided some documentation on shoulders. And then we talk a little bit about bus transportation, what's available in terms of alternative modes. And so that sort of hits on, most of the transportation part of things. And then the sort of second part of the document is related to environmental resources. So that's our subconsultant, TRC. They're an environmental consulting firm based in Maine. They really looked at historic, archaeological, and natural resources in that study area. So that yellow area, they looked at a host of things. I'm not going to go through this. There's a lot of detail in here. They've done a lot of great work in terms of establishing, what's there for resources, how different alternatives are going to be potentially impacted by various locations of facility. And so they've got a lot of good information. I'm a traffic guy, so I'm not super, I don't have a lot of expertise in the details of this stuff, but they have performed, baseline analysis of what's going on from a resource perspective, on the project. So any questions related to the existing condition report that anybody has? Okay, hearing none, I'm gonna keep on trucking. So the next part of the agenda was to kind of summarize the alternatives that quite frankly we've been working on. This has been, we've been at it now for a while. And so, this memo was a brief memo that was circulated to both the town and DOT to kind of generally, broadly talk about the alternatives that we're going to evaluate as part of this study. And I'm going to kind of walk through these, and I've got a graphic that's attached. We're going to do something called a no build, which is basically we're going to evaluate conditions in the year 2045. So what's it going to be like out in Skowhegan, in 2045, assuming no infrastructure changes other than improvements that have been already programmed. And the one that we list here is that currently the Department of Transportation has a programmed improvement to install a traffic signal with some geometric improvements at Madison and Elm and Commercial. So that one's going to be assumed. So we're going to go ahead and look at what's it like 2045. I can tell you things aren't going to get better, right? As you get some growth, we're estimating that traffic will, and I'll talk about a little bit more later, but traffic's going to grow by roughly 15% over the next 20 or so years. And so about half a percent per year. With that growth, things are probably you're gonna see greater congestion because volumes are gonna go up. Then the next alternative, we're calling alternative one, is something called transportation system management. And that's where we look at, are there improvements that we can identify that help to address some of those safety problems? I had those diagrams and those problems at those 3 locations. Are there things we could do to the roadway or intersections to mitigate those safety problems and mitigate some of the congestions? Are there things you could do by adding signals, adding turn lanes, other improvements that could help to mitigate congestion? So that's alternative one. Can you solve some of the problems with system improvements? The alternative 2 is something called transportation demand management. It's part of our broad look of how can we address transportation deficiencies through demand management. So we have sort of our approach to sort of looking at ways to improve conditions is either driven by capacity improvements or by the volume demand. Can you change the number of vehicles that travel through a roadway system or a community by demand management, which means in general, van pool, carpool, transit, alternative work schedules, those types of strategies. So we're going to look at that. I don't think there's a lot of potential opportunity to have a significant change in that demand in Skowhegan, but it's something that we want to look at and just check that box as we move along in the process. Alternative 3 is, can you widen the existing Smith bridges? Is there some widening scenario of those bridges that help you address some of the issues? And again, everything's going to be reviewed, back to that purpose and need statement that I talked about previously. And so, is there a widening scenario that helps to address and meet purpose and need? And then we have 3 different sort of bridge alignments, and I'm going to kind of go to the graphic where, again, these were back in when we developed this memo was sort of like a general's location of some of these alignments, and one was downstream, downstream of the Great Eddy. One was in town somewhere, located in town, sort of downstream of the existing Smith bridges. 3 is that widening scenario. Can you do some widening of the existing 2 structures to kind of help with things? And then a location upstream. So those were sort of the alternatives. Those were the alternatives that basically this memo identified as what we're going to move forward with in terms of evaluating conditions. Any questions on that memo?
I have one.
Yes. I can't, I'm having trouble hearing you. Is it me or?
I don't know. How about now? Is that any better?
That is better.
Okay. In regards to E3E, that's one of the old plan locations, which is just south of that. I think it's 4.
Yes.
No. Yeah. Has there been any consideration for that? And the reason I'm asking, I know that looking into the future, and I also realize that this is a second bridge project and not a connector project, but there is some concerns that I recall from the last meeting that we had, public meeting, that looking into and should a connector / bypass be considered, which would be the location to accommodate that alignment, I guess is what I'm asking.
Can you repeat that question again? Because you did come in and out, at least for me.
I understand it was a long question. The short question would be E3E.
Yeah.
That 2007, so on. Does that take into consideration? There's a couple of yellow circles on these. Is that Eagle's Nest location?
Correct. That's exactly what that is. That's the Eagle Nest location. We feel that we can locate that downstream bridge location to be compatible with the Eagle's Nest area. That we can locate it to avoid sort of the area of impact. And so we've sort of created an alignment to do so. We kind of show it in this next graphic. I don't know if you can see it. We've kind of located it to avoid sort of that Eagle's Nest area.
Yes, I do see that. And the second part of my question was, in regards to the future, should it be necessary to do a bypass connector with the second bridge along well with those considerations?
Yeah, we're not evaluating any scenario that looks at a bypass.
Okay,
So,
and
yeah.
I only bring it up because it would be a shame to do something and then 20 years down the road realize that, hey, you know, we should have put this bridge elsewhere to get the alignment that we need for such a project.
Tom, this is
Yeah.
Nate Howard. I can chime in on that. You know, that
Okay.
I'd say that ship has sailed. You know, that study was canceled years ago. You know, there's no real consideration of the bypass, which is specifically outlined in this. So it's just, you know, so that, you know, I understand where you're coming from, but that is not really a factor in the study. You know, it's purely looking at second bridge alternatives.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions before I move on to some traffic data? All right, so let me go to the full screen mode. All right, so again, we have a consultant on our team, Kevin Hooper Associates, who his purpose is only to do this kind of work, which is basically project traffic,
That's all he does.
you know, based upon existing information, socioeconomic population forecasts, and then what happens when you build these potential improvement alternatives. So we've been working closely with Kevin to kind of look at, okay, what happens if you do this, you do that, what does it mean from a traffic perspective? So this graphic basically summarizes daily volume. So again, you know, how many, you know, that number over an entire day, how many vehicles are crossing, and then what the change would be with some of the bridge alternatives. And so I'm going to kind of walk through this a little bit to kind of give you an explanation. So this green box represents how many vehicles would be on the bridge, where the bridge is. And in 2045, we estimate that the traffic will go to about 29,000 vehicles, approximately. So again, it's going to increase. I don't think there's any question about it. Again, like I said, it's about a 15% per year increase. You know, over, you know, from today's conditions to 2045. And again, that's based upon just, you know, that Kevin's been working with something called the statewide model that the state has employed with the department as part of making these projections. And so we're going to see growth, and it's going to go up to just under 30,000. And so if you constructed an upstream bridge, right? So this is upstream, right? Near the school complex, roughly. You would see that structure basically take about 6,500 vehicles. And so you would see some reduction on the Smith bridges. So, you know, related to that. Now, not all traffic on that bridge, the upstream bridge, is using the Smith bridges. So it's not an equal sort of, you know, math exercise. But you'll see some reduction, you know, in the range of, you know, almost 5,000 vehicles. If you build a downtown, we're calling it the downtown bridge alignment, which would basically take off from somewhere near South Free Street, potentially, you know, in that French Street area, and then somehow connect over, you know, just east of Town Hall and line up with 150, you would see the reduction. You would see a reduction of about 10,000 less vehicles on the Smith bridges, and that bridge would carry about 11,000.
So,
And again,
Tom, can I interrupt you here?
Sure.
And I don't know if this this question stays to you or maybe to Nathan, but what is the magic number for the Smith bridges now to make them efficient? And I'm asking that question because I'm seeing, even with these projections, we're looking at this, even if there was another downtown bridge built, we're still at 20,000. Are these bridges only capable of 18,000 now? Is that the efficient number to roll stuff through this town? Or, because if that's the solution, then none of these solutions work, I guess is what I'm getting at. We're not solving anything going into 2045, and we're sitting back here. Some of us are, some of us were retired, but we're sitting back here again. So what is the magic number for the Smith bridges as they are now?
Really good question. So I don't know that there is a magic number as it relates to how many vehicles what is the limit of the number of vehicles on the bridge structure that would create undue congestion or problems. What really drives system problems, transportation system problems, are the intersections.
Right. Well,
So what we will, and just so you know, so this is just a snapshot of the daily numbers. We also have been forecasting, remember in that existing condition report, I showed all those turning movement bubbles and diagrams?
correct.
We are estimating at each one of the intersections what the numbers would be like with each one of these alternatives in 2045. Now that's going to be the data that's going to tell us, even with, say, an upstream bridge, you're still going to have congestion at Island Ave, Main, and West Front. It's possible. I mean, to sort of, I think, get to what your comment and I think what you're thinking about, it's possible that even with these even with a bridge in place, a new second bridge, you still may need to do other improvements at some of the intersections. It's not guaranteed that the bridge is going to solve all the problems that exist, within the current downtown.
Tom, can I chime in here?
Yep.
Yeah, so I think Steve's getting at is, there's no number, right? We can use level of service for adjacent intersections, but really it's more than that. I think we would have to go back to answer that question and look at, the purpose and need of the study. Obviously one of them is traffic and congestion. You can do some things without a bridge to work on that. One thing we heard at the public meeting, and I think it's also in our purpose and need, is trucks, right? Getting the trucks out of downtown, which I guess we identify downtown as the triangle. And then this idea of sort of redundancy of infrastructure. So it's more than just, all right, we hit, 15,000 on the bridge. That's our magic number. There really isn't. We don't have what's the capacity of the bridge? It's level of service. So I think the answer to that question would be what's the purpose and need? And there is a lot in our purpose and need.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right, Nate. I mean, again, like I said, we've got to go back to that purpose and need, and the purpose and need statement speaks to I would say lots of things, but like Nate said, there's a lot in it as it relates to truck traffic, congestion, safety, redundancy. We heard it loud and clear at the public meeting. People were concerned about emergency access, bridge closure, if something happens. So all those factors sort of get put in the blender as part of assessing an alternative that really meets that purpose and need. Congestion will be one, certainly, but it may not be the driving force to how we find one that sort of rises to the top.
Okay, yeah, because again, I'm looking at this 2045 projections. It's without fixing that intersection on the south side of the river, we're back to the same numbers. The upstream solutions, same numbers. The downstream solution, same numbers.
You know what? Of course, this is my job, but I look at the data and I had the same conclusion, particularly with like the downstream, because we heard it loud and clear too at the public meeting. Downstream, there was a lot of, I'll say, comments, people thought downstream was the place for it. But what I find, again, in this box, the green box, you build a downstream bridge, you end up with almost the same amount of cars that are there today. So you're in essence not, again, just volume perspective, strictly volume, the volume on the current bridges would be almost the same with the downstream bridge. So you're right. And so in my head, what that means is, and again, I can't say this at this time. I will be able to say it. Will you need to do substantial improvements to some of the intersections to get them to work downtown, even with another bridge? And we'll get there as part of our modeling and evaluation. And so we'll have, we're going to develop a matrix and talk about a lot of things. There may be that'll include a lot of those metrics to help us sort of understand, build a downstream bridge. This is what you need to do. And as you know, particularly the Island Ave, Main Street, West Front intersection, there's not, what I'm finding is there's not an easy fix there. I think the mitigation is, if you want it to get, again, if you want to get it to work, there's probably going to be some costly improvements that are going to be needed there. And so you got to add those all up if you're, in terms of what it means.
Yep, that's what I feel. I feel that the solution there is really the solution. Whatever happens elsewhere, that intersection getting corrected, that's the expense of this whole project, as far as I can see.
I'm late to the party. I've missed every meeting except the first one, so I apologize for that. We're talking about this, I'm going to call it the South Side intersection, and then I don't know, 2 pages ago there was option 1 through 8. One was this demand management changes, and you kind of put that off to the side, like maybe the demand would be harder to achieve or use. Am I crazy to think that if we just offset so at that intersection, you've got 2 things going on. You've got school and you've got New Balance. And they both go and show up at roughly the same time. If anything was able to change there, would that help traffic flow? Of course it would, but
yeah,
have we even looked at something like that? Maybe it's been brought up and maybe I sound like I'm 100 years old, but.
No, I can't remember in what forum it was discussed, but there were discussions about can we change some of the patterns and loading of volumes to help address it, and it's a strategy that's used elsewhere, in Maine and the country. Can you shift some of those peaks, spread the peaks? You hear that a lot, spreading the peak to help with things. We need to talk about that. I can't tell you whether I think it's going to have real meaning. Now, like Nate said, there's a purpose and need statement. There's other metrics that we're evaluating than just, is that intersection going to work or not work?
Right.
So that will be part of it. But I think what we'll find is that, the TDM, the demand management strategies, may help, but they're not going to address some of the other purpose and need requirements that we need to look at.
Certainly be a lot cheaper. And again, I know I sound like 100 years old, but I come from a family that's had a business here for literally 110 years. So I've been listening to this since my grandfather said, all you got to do is change the shifts at the mills, because he still had it in his head that we still had all these woolen mills downtown, obviously. But obviously there should be some changes there that could be tweaked to help alleviate this process, maybe even short term, and again, it'd be a lot cheaper.
Yeah, we'll definitely get at that and provide some analysis of what it means, and as part of our comparison. We're going to look at every one of those alternatives in a meaningful way to kind of get at it. How does it address purpose and need, and how does it address all the things we need to consider as part of final, the preferred or most feasible option, with what we come up with.
Yeah, I can talk about TDM in a little. We've had other studies, studies near Bath Iron Works where, we found, I don't know if this is the case, but sometimes in the case in terms of schools or businesses, the shift times are slightly before peak. So the changes don't necessarily always affect peak time. I don't know if that's true in this one. We've also find, there's very reluctance to, especially school districts. We found this in Saco. They're beholden to parents and other things, so traffic is not really a consideration that they're willing to change their school times. And the same with like Bath Iron Works, it's labor relations, it's manufacturing, it's process. So I don't know if we've had any success using TDM in these type of scenarios. And it's a good idea if it works and if it affects the peak, but there's so many other things going on that they just, don't really want to hear. Traffic is a reason to change their shift changes. So,
Right. And I will admit that I have zero empirical evidence on this. This is just driving over those bridges my entire life. So,
If I could interject, can I?
Please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. When we started the first bridge study or the second bridge study there, we had a meeting with SAPI, with New Balance, the schools, and Solon Manufacturing was on the island at the time, and they did agree to do that. And I don't know, how it changed back, but it wasn't happening for quite a while. It did help some, but it didn't make a significant difference, because even though, the school let out at 1:30, and then New Balance decided to start, I guess they agreed to let people start leaving at 3, or shifting at 3, and then SAPI was at 4 or something like that. I don't remember. It did make a little bit of a difference, but it wasn't a significant change in the traffic.
I'm going to just add one more thing, and this again goes back to Tom and Nate. I guess from my perspective as a taxpayer, I just want to make sure that whatever this committee and ultimately the design committee, Greg and Christine are on, that we're coming up, that the funding for the solution includes the intersections, because if the solution ends up being a new bridge, yeah, that's fine and dandy. If that's what it is, that's what it is in my perspective. But if we haven't fixed all the problems, even if that problem ends up being 2 miles up Madison Avenue, and we say that this intersection needs to be timed differently to make all these other ones work, then I just want to make sure that we're providing the taxpayers as a whole, a solution as a whole, and it's all part of that funding. We're not getting into a point where 10 years from one solution, we have to come up with another solution to fix this. I watched this. I'm a Boston boy. I watched this through the Big Dig. We solved 10 problems to create 20 more. Yeah, you drive through Boston really fast now, but you sit on the south side of the artery for 2 hours to get into Boston. So what's the difference? The solution didn't solve the problem. I'm coming from that. So I'm looking at this saying our solution as a team needs to take all of that into consideration. The traffic flow from all the way from the Madison line to, just outside of 201, just outside the urban limits, I guess, for 201 and Route 2 and in both directions. As long as we've got the whole solution, that's ultimately what I want to see come out of this. The whole solution and the whole solution funding source. There you go. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. A lot of times with these studies, it's not, one alternative is the magic bullet. A lot of times the short-term, intermediate alternative, biggest, in terms of funding alternatives. So, it may be that, there are some near-term strategies that, help meet some of the purpose and need, and some longer-term strategies that meet the entire purpose and need. But yeah, and the funding, that's going to be the harder one, especially, the pandemic has really changed things in terms of our funding, but, the purpose, we do studies to develop projects that we can implement, right? So that's, that would be our goal.
Good.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Nate, that we'll have a menu of potentially short-term improvements that could address some of the problems that we know exist right now. That could, we've done it on other studies that I've worked on with Nate, where, you know, in Saco, for example, yeah, they're going to be big, costly interchange improvements that are programmed, but could take some time. But there are some lower cost signalization, geometric changes that can sort of go on a different path and get implementation that are consistent with the overall recommendation of this plan and the study, but can happen in a quicker time frame.
Adding to the pandemic talk, are we, not to kill this over the head, but because this project is out a certain amount of way, are we putting the assumption in that things will be back to normal once construction starts? Or with, and this isn't just this project, you can fill me in with all the projects. Do you have a new appendice that says COVID, what ifs? Or, I mean, because obviously traffic count's way down right now, but I'm assuming it's all going to come back. But that is a large assumption right now. How are people in your field looking at projections now?
Tom, I guess, you know, this would be similar to, you know, what happened during the Great Recession in 08, 09, you know, traffic went way, way down. And it took, I don't know how long, it eventually came back, but it took a while. I don't really know if the rebound will be similar, but, you know, I think it would be a sort of a same scenario, I guess, right, Tom?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we really haven't come up with sort of a policy in the business, transportation planning business, about how we're gonna, you know, modify forecasts. I mean, I do think there'll be some changes. I mean, work at home, remote working, I think will be greater in the future than it was previously. And so I think you could see some changes, but I do think it'll rebound. As Nate said, I mean, history has indicated that it does come back. And so one thing's for sure, we're not doing any data collection at this time. You know, so like 2020, if you need to get information, there's no point in collecting data now on the street just because volumes are way down. But I think we'll see. My sense is there'll be a bounce back. All right, so let's keep moving along so we can kind of stay on track timing wise. So again, I'll just, you know, if you look at the 3 different alignment alternatives, downtown has the most estimated use, 11,000-ish, downstream about 7,000, and then upstream about 6,500. And then the next graphic, and again, this is just to let you know that we're also looking at, you know, what happens from a truck perspective. And again, because it's one of those purpose and need metrics, you're going to see as we move forward in our you know, documentation that you'll see in the future that, you know, we got to understand what it means from a truck perspective. Are these alternatives pulling trucks out of downtown, out of the triangle, as Nate said? And so again, we're doing future growth forecasts of trucks in the area. And again, through that same sort of statewide model, we've been able to sort of make projections about how truck traffic is going to change. It's similar sort of growth projections as as passenger cars. We're estimating about a 15% growth in truck traffic over the next 20, 30 years. And so this just shows you a little bit about, you know, how much truck traffic it would be sort of diverted to some of the existing bridges. We also, like a sort of a previous comment, okay, so we're going to intercept some trucks on 2 that would go across this downstream option. But what does it mean in terms of downstream, in terms of how those trucks are going to circulate on 201 through some of those intersections? So we got to look at some of the implication, which is why we'll go back to sort of the turning movements, understand how trucks are going to maneuver to different locations. What does it mean geometrically that a truck now may be a through movement, in the future it's a turn movement? that means a lot to us in terms of providing appropriate roadway infrastructure to make sure they can make those maneuvers. We're going to be looking at those kinds of things. And so, again, downtown has slightly more trucks using it. Downstream, reasonable number of trucks. And then upstream really doesn't serve a lot of the origin destination patterns as it relates to truck movements. Any comments about this?
And that's alternative 5, which is the downstream one closer to town. I assume that's going to be right in the vicinity of the post office. Has there been consideration in regards to especially trucks and the volume of traffic that's going to be creating a lot of congestion there?
We'll be looking at that. We'll be looking at what does it mean at a new created intersection with that downtown alignment at, near 150. So we'll be looking at that. We don't have the answer yet. In fact, we're laying out some concepts about what happens there if you were to create that new intersection in that area. So we'll have that documented and evaluated.
Okay, and I also assume that consideration has been taken about the Veterans Memorial there.
Yeah, let me kind of move through because we kind of talk about some of that in the next
Okay.
some of the next documents. Okay, so let's kind of go through that now. And so, and just so you know, this is sort of, you can see that some of this work was done back in February. We've already been sort of doing more analysis and concepts. We're sort of laying out concepts because to get a, I'll say a reasonable cost, we gotta kind of do a concept design of the roadway and the bridge structure. So that's ongoing now. So we've got more detail. I don't have it for presenting now, but I can just tell you since February we've sort of developed some concept alignment and in greater detail. But this is the downstream option. Couple of things. We've got sort of a pro-con table down below. No relocations required. Relocations would be like a building or a home. Not significant impact to butters. It's relatively shallow, so it makes pier construction somewhat easier. Some of the elevation challenges, particularly on the Route 2 side, will require an overpass. So you create a slightly longer structure, and then this is going to be over 2, and then it's going to loop down to create the intersection. You may see that and wonder why it's doing that. We cannot get down to grade to create what you would normally see as a T intersection like you do in 201 here. That creates, it's not a fatal flaw. It's something that we can certainly construct. It's going to add some cost to the project. So just be aware of that. There's some impact. There's some conservation area and some hardwood forests that our environmental consultant identified, but nothing that would appear to be any sort of environmental constraint that's a showstopper. That's not the case. This is sort of the Eagle's Nest area where we're keeping the alignment away from that with that alternative. This is the downtown option, and we're looking. So this is the structure. This is Town Hall 150 runs up here. So this is the alignment. We are looking at a few different alignments to Free and South and over where French comes into 201 as part of just looking at them as part of our assessment. As indicated in the table, it's the shortest structure of the 3 crossings. Likely one pier is going to be needed, which could be aligned with the Ped Bridge Pier. Shortest total approaches in terms of roadway approaches. has the, we talked about volume, it does result in the greatest volume using the structure. Some cons, steep riverbanks, the impact. I mean, you talked about the 4 Veterans Park. It's something that is a factor in the process, and we've got to document it. We have to talk about it, and it's certainly part of the process that we're going to be reviewing and looking at. There's impact to buildings and properties, particularly on the south side, as you know, that neighborhood. So there's impact to properties and homes that will be part of the evaluation. And there may be one historical eligible property on the south side, and then certainly there's some historic properties in downtown. So it's got, again, a lot of these have pros and cons. As you see, they can be different, but those are some of the factors that are coming into play for the downtown one. And then the upstream, you know, again, there is the proposed water park. It's upstream, obviously away from the water park. Likely no relocations. Generally little impact to abutters. There would probably be a need for 3 piers. It's the largest river crossing. It's also deep. It's very deep in that section, so it complicates things a little bit. But again, nothing that you couldn't design and construct around. And it does have the lowest amount of demand that would shift away from you know, the Smith bridges.
Hey, Tom, can I interrupt for a minute?
Yep.
Well, so 11:15 is about 5 minutes away. So Craig and Christine, what do we want to do here? It seems like we've gotten through a portion of our material.
Defer Christine.
So should we gauge whether or not to extend this meeting or hold another meeting?
Well, if I can chime in, I mean, I'm almost through to some discussion about the next step in the schedule. And so, I mean, why don't we, right, so I'm almost through the agenda, because after this table, we get into some discussion on TSM, which I think will be quick, and then we go to schedule. So, I mean, maybe 10 minutes.
How much time do you think it's going to take?
I'm thinking 10 minutes. 10.
Okay.
I would probably double that just if we're going to talk about the next public meeting.
Okay, so is it okay to go 20 minutes?
Anybody opposed to that?
No.
All right. I would prefer to press on than to have another meeting.
Agreed.
Okay. So all right, so this table, and I'm not going to go through it. It basically was just a quick summary from our bridge engineer, just really getting into slightly a little bit more detail than what was in the prior summary for each one of those. So you can go through it. Again, it just basically talks about similar things in terms of, you know, the number of spans the structure would have. Is it easy to build? Some of the complications. So I think that's just almost repetitive. So the other thing I wanted to kind of talk about is, again, TSM. It's one of the alternative transportation system management. The locations that we need to focus on as it relates to either safety or mobility, congestion. And so commercial water court, remember there's safety problems there. So we're gonna have to look at and identify potential ways to kind of mitigate safety problems. We haven't figured that out yet, but I just wanted to kind of lay the groundwork for the locations that we're gonna be looking at as part of trying to, you know, make recommendations for certain locations. The I would say the probably one of the greatest congestion bottleneck locations is the South Side intersection. And it also has safety problems. And that's not unusual to have, both safety and congestion problems at the same location. There is a project to build a right turn lane, onto Main Street from West Front Street. That's quite frankly not going to have significant impacts or improve. That's not going to significantly improve operations. So we need to look at other things. What else can be done there? Adding turn lanes is a possibility. We know that's going to be part of it. It could mean that turn lanes mean you need to widen the bridge so that there are more lanes coming off the existing bridge or more lanes going onto the existing bridge. That's not out of the question as part of that intersection. And then we list roundabout, again, I'd love to get feedback what the committee thinks about a roundabout configuration. It's something that the state does like to consider at locations in terms of dealing with safety and operational things. Is it something that there's interest in?
You got too much of a grade.
Yeah, I think there is definitely a few challenges with a roundabout configuration. One would be the topography. Two would be vehicle type, a lot of large trucks. That's not, again, that's not, I wouldn't view those as fatal flaws. We'd have to look at it. And so I just didn't want, if it was a non-starter from the committee's perspective, then I'd like to hear that but we were thinking that we would look at it conceptually and whether it proved to have any benefit. So that one's going to need a lot of attention. Madison Commercial Elm, again, that's got a programmed improvement. That's in, I don't know the schedule, but that's got a signalization project that's going to help that, I think, significantly, quite frankly. Our modeling shows that by signalizing that, you're going to see improvement in how things operate at that location. The triangle one-way, the sense is that we're going to keep the one-way configuration and make improvements as it relates to safety and making it appropriate for pedestrians and bicyclists and people parking and all those things. So what improvements could we make as it relates to, I call them complete streets improvements. And then lastly, Madison at High, we do show in the 2045 analysis that there are some backups on Madison southbound headed towards the bridge, Smith Bridge, where you sort of see the two lanes on Madison that become one before you go around the corner to get on the bridge. That creates some backup problems. So we're going to have to look at that. So those are some of the, those are the locations that we're going to be, focusing our attention for system management improvements. Any questions on these?
So just to be clear, the roundabout you're looking at, the Sam mentioned the South Side intersection, is that?
That's correct. Yeah, the South Side.
I mean, I would shoot that down right now, but I'm wondering.
It'd certainly take a lot of real estate for a roundabout to handle a wheeler truck, right? But I'm picturing the roundabouts in, Europe, very small. I don't see a Richard Carrier truck making it around one of those small ones. So it'd have to be pretty substantial. Something more like Augusta by the new hospital.
Probably. Yeah, that's a probably good example. I mean, it may be something that I would call a hybrid roundabout where certain approaches could have two approach lanes and two circulatory lanes, which would increase the size. I mean, here's my general take. Even with addition of turn lane for capacity, because my general modeling results are showing you got to add turn lanes. Maybe it's a double left from West Front onto Smith Bridge, just because there's a lot of cars coming from the school campus turning left or other approaches that need more lanes. It's going to get bigger. That intersection, to accommodate the demand that's there, and with the forecasted volume in 2045, you're going to be, it's going to get bigger.
I think the intersection needs to get bigger. I agree. I just don't see how that roundabout will work, though. I mean, that's not just bigger. That's 4 times bigger.
Well, and that would entail securing an additional lane along the bridges, in between the bridges, right? So that run into the fire department and abutting property owners. Sorry, my son's yelling at me.
That's okay. That's okay. No, I would, again, my sense is yes. And, you know, just understanding if you want to get efficiency and performance of 2 lanes, that you need to carry it, you know, like the merge issue, right? You get 2 lanes that drop right after the intersection. To get really good performance, you got to carry it a long distance. It's likely you'll be widening both bridges it's probably what would happen in those scenarios. So
doesn't that still dump everything back into town, which, you know, even if you have 2 lanes going across the bridge going into town, what do you do with them once you get into town?
It's a great question.
Yeah,
it's a great question.
And the roundabout, and the roundabout I did too. I kind of go on with the others logistically and geographically. That looks like a really a nightmare to achieve, to really have. And again, we're not getting the traffic out of town, which the two south bridges, I think, as the study shows, is more efficient than any of the others.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with any comment regarding the roundabout. We thought it was important to put it there for discussion purposes. What I didn't want to have happen is we work through these options and then we get the comment, why didn't you look at a roundabout? And so I think we still need to speak to it, would be my guess, as part of this alternative, and why probably, you know, maybe more from a qualitative perspective, why we think it's not, you know, not an appropriate type of improvement at this location. All right, so that's that. And now I think we're, before the schedule, we were going to talk a little bit about the next step. And so I'm going to it's related to schedule. So we're here, May 13th, and really the next step in the process was to consider the next public meeting. And so I don't know whether, Craig, you wanna lead the discussion on that, and or not?
Well, first of all, let's remember that the purpose of the next public meeting will be to provide a little review of your existing conditions and needs, like you did for us just now. But that's just setting the stage for the real presentation, which is the different alternatives, the evaluation of alternatives, your analysis, and get public feedback on those alternatives, right? Is that the way you see the purpose of the next public meeting, Tom?
I do. I don't know that we'll get into, you know, substantial detail.
Right, but we need to share with the public enough so they can have informed discussion, ask informed questions, and give informed opinions about these different alternatives. Let me check with the committee. Is that what you see as the purpose of the next public meeting? Any hands?
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, that's helpful to hear. Okay, so Tom, from your perspective, when would you be ready to go? You know, you've said that this report is 98% done. You've made some noises in your presentation, like, you know, we got to look at that. And when would you be ready to go for a public meeting?
I mean, we certainly would need to, you know, work with Nate and the department about, we need time to kind of produce the presentation materials, get review, and ultimately approval. The 98%, just to be clear, the 98% complete is the existing condition work. It's not, we're not 98% done in terms of the alternative analysis. So,
right.
You know, there's still a lot of work to be done. So I mean, I'd love to hear from Nate. I mean, Nate, do you have a sense about what we want to present for material at the next public meeting? How deep do we want to go into details?
Well, I think, and I'm assuming that the level of detail that we talked about on this meeting is what we would present to the public, because that's what's available, right? We have, you know, the existing conditions, anything new, I think we went over that last time, and then those alternatives that you showed, and I think we need to get deeper than the boxes. I think, you know, sort of, and we'd call these, you know, all options on the table. We wouldn't, you know, say we've narrowed it really.
No, correct.
You know, because we need feedback on that, you know, so,
Yeah.
and see what, you know, what they think of the downtown, or what they think of the upgrade or the down.
Okay, so
I think so. I don't see a lot of new material, but you know, a lot of the stuff that we presented here, perhaps in less detail.
Yeah. So to answer your original question, Craig, would be, we don't need a lot of time. I mean, if it's repackaging, sort of what we went through just now, with maybe some nuance changes. You know, as the schedule says, we have targeted June. I think we could do a June one.
A late June, I'm going to call it. Okay.
Yeah. Seems like we could do it.
Yeah, let me probably throw something in here that someone just sent me. We should have a discussion. You know, we're showing these alternatives, and you know, it'd be nice to have sort of a matrix where we're weighing them. You know, and one of the important ones that people see is cost, right? That's always an important, you know, everything on the table. You know, when one of those is an $80 million bridge, I'm just throwing numbers out there, you know, so I guess it might need a little discussion how close we are there, you know, just.
Yeah, I can say, Nate, we started to kind of, and I think I sent you sort of a framework for a matrix at one point, not that long ago. And so and that's probably too much detail for the public, but we're developing costs now. And so I don't think we're too far off from having some of those details that would be, you know, able to, I mean, I know it's got to get reviewed. There's that review process that's required. But I think late June, I think we still can get there and have the detail that we need. So we get the feedback. I'm with you. I mean, we want to give them enough information, the public, so they feel like, so that's helpful for them to get the comments we want and sort of, you know, meaningful comments.
I'm pushing things along here a little bit. Members of the committee, what do you think about a late June meeting? And part of what I want to hear your reaction to also is, what if we still have COVID restrictions? Would you want to have a Zoom meeting? So two alternatives. We could schedule something for late June, an in-person meeting. If we can't do it, we postpone. But we could right now say, we're having a meeting on June 24th, in person or Zoom. Either way, it's a go. So I'd like your feedback on, what do you think we should do about the in-person Zoom thing? But I'd also like your feedback on the timing. Do you think we should have a meeting third week of June?
You're on.
Are you saying either or, Zoom or in person, or both?
Not both. It would be either or.
either or?
This is Joel. I would imagine if we do want it, even at the end of June, there may be a 50-person restriction. If that includes, for example, everyone here, that's already 17 people. It depends how many people are going to turn up. Just thinking logistically, if there's an in-person one, it'd have to be in a location where we could distance 50 people, and if any more people show up, then there needs to be a contingency as well.
Yeah, Craig, this is Nate. Really, on just other studies, the 50 restriction is too close and probably too low for most of our public meetings. So we are moving them all to virtual. Ultimately up to the town, but
what is this?
I really don't think during June we should be going in person.
What do people in this town think? Would you rather have a Zoom meeting? Here's what your choice is probably going to be: a Zoom meeting in late June, or just postpone indefinitely for an in-person meeting and wait until all restrictions are lifted. What do you think, members of the committee?
I think it has to be in person. I look at the age demographic here. Zoom is not going to work.
Okay. All right. Thanks for weighing in. Any other opinions on this?
I would
agree
second.
with Steve.
If you agree with what Stephen said, show me a thumbs up. If you have a different point of view, raise a hand and let's hear it. How many people agree that Zoom is not a good choice? Okay. Folks that have a different point of view, anybody want to say differently?
I think considering conditions that the way they are now, I would prefer a Zoom meeting unless it changes.
Okay. Okay, that's helpful to hear. Christine?
I think that I wanted to weigh in. Sorry, this is Betty.
Hi, Betty.
I think that if we were going to look at Zoom, that we should look at not just Zoom, that we should have available to be able to be on Facebook. And we also have a community channel, Channel 11. And if we were going to do virtual, we need to have more ways that people can connect. And I think a lot of us that are older with white hair, we're getting used to this sort of thing. And I think we could get a lot of input. And I don't know that there would be a problem to have a public hearing if we could and allow people to do either or.
I see, Zoom or come in person.
Great.
Yeah. Very helpful to hear this input. Anyone else?
Craig, this is Nate again. We did a public meeting in Sanford. A lot, sounds similar to what she just suggested. It was a Zoom meeting, but we also streamed it on their local public access.
Yeah.
And I think it streams on the town's website. So it was a free-for. It involved, some trial runs, but it worked. And we reached a lot of people. There was more people, logged in and, than we normally get at public meetings. So it seemed like we reached more people. And it was a good solution. Otherwise you get to the point in studies, if you don't get public input, you really, it's not.
So let me stay with you a minute, Nathan. From your perspective, from the department's perspective, is it okay with you if public input was delayed until an in-person meeting of larger than 50 people was possible? There's a lot of sentiment on this committee that's what they want to do. How would that sit with the department?
It's a joint study with the town, so we certainly accept that, and that would be fine. Just realizing it affects schedule, right? You can only go so far without public input, right? We really can't go beyond this stage without asking people their thoughts, but again, this is
right. It would kind of stall the project.
Term study, so maybe that's fine.
Yeah. Okay, well, if I had to come to a conclusion based on the discussion so far, and I did ask you a little poll, I would say establish a tentative date for late June, but with the understanding that if a face-to-face meeting of more than 50 people is not possible, we will look for an alternative in-person date in the future, and we would just leave it like that. Does that sound as a reasonable conclusion?
I'm just finding difficulty with it because we're intentionally not scheduling our town meeting because we can't have more than 50 people based on the governor's order right now, tentatively until September.
Okay, so then the other alternative, Christine, is we just don't have a public input meeting scheduled. We're not even going to tentatively schedule one for June. Let's just put this on ice and wait until we can have an in-person meeting. That's what I think your conclusion is. Am I right?
Well, I mean, it's either virtual with trying to figure out how to best get the input, or it's putting it on ice.
That's right. Those are the two choices. And I've heard most of your committee say you don't want to do virtual. I'm happy to revisit that. You know, we can put it on different platforms. We can do the best we can. But I haven't heard anybody speak in favor of that.
I think virtual would be great, but I think it will exclude a lot of townspeople. I mean, Skowhegan is certainly a different demographic than Sanford. I just don't know if we'd have a good, cross-cut of demographic here in Skowhegan.
Right.
Virtual.
Are
Just
you
having to
using
be on.
technology for your meetings? Like, isn't this already happening?
What's that?
For our selectmen's meetings, how are we doing those? We're doing those, yeah, I mean, we're streaming those on Facebook. They're being shared through Channel 11. But honestly, selectmen's meetings, we might get like a handful or less of public that attend on a regular basis. It's different when you're having clearly it was different when we had a public meeting for this second bridge topic up at the community center, and we actually had a good turnout.
Okay.
So I don't know that that's an appropriate gauge.
I think this ultimately comes back to Christina and Kara and Greg, because those are the people who are going to be fielding all the angry calls that, oh, I didn't see it, I missed it, how come we didn't know, if it goes to a virtual platform.
Well, so the thing is when we were talking about what we're going to go over at our next meeting, guess what? Everything that we've gone over now is going to be available to the public as soon as I can get it on our site. It's going to be a preview to the public meeting. The whole agenda packet is already on our website. So anybody that says that they missed it, it's still going to be available.
So Christine, what do you think we should do?
Gosh, it's hard. I prefer to defer to the committee. I get the strong sense that there's a desire to do it in person. But I do understand what Nate's saying about moving this along.
It might have to be
virtual.
It might have to be a two-part meeting. You have the Zoom virtual, and then you get it out there, and then you field calls for a week, and then you go have another meeting.
That's an idea.
So
not that I want to have any more meetings.
Yeah. So when we go virtual, people don't have to be doing that live. They can do it at their own leisure, on their own schedule, and they can provide feedback through multiple ways. I mean, we could do that through emails or mail, or previously we did a survey.
Can I
still get feedback?
Yep, go ahead, Betty.
This is Betty. Can I just, I don't feel like I was heard I probably didn't speak as well as I should have because I don't feel like I was understood as well. I wasn't talking just about Channel 11 or just Zoom. We do our church services on Sunday morning, and we do Zoom, and it's on YouTube, and it's also on Facebook. And people send in comments. And so what I'm talking about is being virtual, but not in just one platform.
Okay.
And
okay.
also doing some of the things Christine was just talking about. Okay.
Okay. So thank you for clarifying that, Betty. That's really great to hear. So here's a new model that has emerged. Call it a hybrid if you like. But have a virtual meeting at a certain place and time, and anybody who wants to do it live, great. But also capture a recording of that meeting and take comments for a week, you know, and publicize it and distribute it, and hope that even, you know, elderly people or whatever demographic you're talking about has a chance sometime over the week to watch the meeting and comment. If we did a virtual meeting that way, how many of the committee would be in favor of scheduling a virtual meeting for the third week in June? Have any of you come around? Do you think you would be willing to have a virtual meeting the third week of June, but record it and take comments for a good amount of time after the meeting? I'm looking for a show of hands. Betty would be supportive of that. Christian would be supportive of that. SJH, I'm sorry, Roger. Okay, we got some hands now. And Stephen,
And if it
too.
doesn't work, we'll try something else.
If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. But let's. I'm glad we talked this through.
This is Joel. Is there no reason why we couldn't hold a in-person meeting with whatever limit that has to be, say 50, but also live stream and have a Zoom connection at that meeting at the same time? So.
Well, there is a. I'm gonna be a little bit bold here. I think there is a reason. Technically, that really elevates the. It's very difficult to film people in a live meeting and get them on the same sort of platform as people calling in. If others feel differently, that's fine. But to have to manage both an in-person meeting and an online meeting is I'm intimidated by that.
Warren Buffett does it every year with Berkshire, but we probably don't have that funding.
Yeah.
And no,
I would say, go ahead, Nathan.
Yeah, I just don't want to be, you know, at the meeting and saying with a counter saying, sorry, we got to turn you away. We're at 50. That would be really poor. That would come off really bad, you know. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in a ton of Zoom meetings, obviously, the last few weeks, and if you promote it well enough and you have someone facilitating the Q&A and you read it out loud, you know, people are a lot more emboldened when they can kind of just type a hard question versus getting up in front of a crowd. And I think we want those hard questions, you know. You know, I'm part of meetings with like 200 people sometimes, and somehow it works, you know. And we'll take questions, you know, we can take questions ahead of time, have that grace period after of a week or two to provide feedback, I think.
Okay. I'm about to go to the calendar and we're going to set a date for this Zoom meeting. Any last questions though on the general conclusion? We're going to try it. Yeah. Okay. So I don't know. I'm turning to you, Christine. You probably have the town calendar there. But maybe there's nothing on it, but.
Yeah, there's not much on it. Let me see. June 24th has possibly a budget meeting. Christian, I got to give you a call. Not necessarily for you guys. I mean, our calendar is wide open.
Okay, somebody throw out a suggestion. You think this is an evening meeting? Is it a 7 o'clock, 7 to 8:30 maybe? What?
I would say we should probably mirror our last public meeting.
That was 7 o'clock. What about June 25th?
June 25th, 7 to 8:30. Any objections?
No.
Seeing none?
Good.
Okay, so that'll be the date of our public meeting. We'll do it by Zoom.
Subject to change without notice.
Subject to change without notice, says the town manager.
That's
I
life
didn't-
today.
All right, so
I didn't get the date nor the time.
it's going to be Thursday, June 25th, from 7 to 8:30.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and we'll record the meeting, and we'll publicize plenty of opportunity for people to submit comments afterwards. And we will also try to make the meeting available on several different platforms simultaneously and in the week following. You know, if it's on YouTube, people can go there over and over again, watch it on their schedule. But that's our general conclusion. Okay, back to you, Tom. I think there's more that you want to cover, right, before we end the meeting?
No, that was it. Schedule was it. I think
Okay.
that was our next step, basically thinking about a public meeting. So we've checked that box. And so I think we've been at it almost 2 hours, and I appreciate your time and feedback. I think this was a really productive meeting, and look forward to connecting in the future.
All right, I would prefer to circle back around to the beginning of the meeting. I know I suggested no votes. I don't think it's any harm doing a vote on minutes, just to tidy that up. So if you guys don't mind, I will entertain a motion to approve the October 29th meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of the previous meeting.
That's Greg.
That's great.
Do I have a second?
Second.
That's Christian. Okay, I have to do a roll call vote. So I'm going to be for Betty.
Yes,
Okay. Greg,
yes,
Yes.
Jason. Is Jason Gaines still on?
He's on mute.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry.
Are you approving the minutes?
Yes.
Okay, Steve Gavoni? You're on mute. I'm looking at you.
Handsome fella, huh? Yeah, I am for.
Okay. Comedic break there. I'm sorry, just kidding. Joel?
Yes.
Okay. Sam, you were absent. So we'll go with abstain, I assume. Christian?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Mark? You were absent, I assume an abstention. Same on Rod.
Yes.
All right, so all approved with 3 abstentions. I appreciate you guys. Let me get that taken care of. So we'll go ahead and plan for June 25th at 7 o'clock. We'll get information out to you. I'm sure our team, Craig, Nate, will be communicating about how we get that advertised.
Okay,
If
thanks a
there's
lot,
nothing
everybody.
further, I'll go ahead and close the meeting. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
You guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take
Thanks.
care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Be safe.
Bye.
bye.
You have a great day, everyone. Stay safe.
Thanks, you too.